Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. So for those of you who are watching for the first time, my name is Greg and I'm a photographer and a musician. And today I'm talking about all the lenses that I use, why I love these lenses. These are the best lenses that work for me, for my type of work. And I just want to give you guys a little bit of insight of how I chose these lenses, why I chose them, and how I use them. Now, before I start the video, I just want to say that I decided to actually take this YouTube channel seriously, so I'll be bringing you a lot of photography content. And my goal is to kind of build a community where we can like challenge each other, do some, go out and shoot photos and share with each other, learn from each other, and kind of have a community where we can discuss about gear, about photography in general, and even other things. So if you're interested in that kind of content, make sure to subscribe. And if you like this video, guys, give it a like because that really helps me start this channel. Okay, so let's get right into it. So the first lens is the Sony G-Master 16-35, which, believe it or not, is my least used lens. I know people rave about this lens and how amazing it is, and they use it for everything. For me, it's my least used lens, and I'll explain in a bit why. But before I do that, let me just say that this is an amazing lens. The sharpness is unbelievable on this lens, even in the corners at 2.8. It's crazy sharp. It's perfect for landscapes or street photography, even environmental portraits, like anything that you want to get the whole scene, like the wide angle is perfect for that. And I also used to own the 16-35 Zeiss f4 before I switched to this, and it was a great lens with good contrast, but I actually wanted the 2.8 for more low light stuff, so that's why I switched it out to this one. And I don't regret it at all. I know it's an expensive lens, but it's worth every penny. It's built like a tank. And yeah, it's a really good lens. Now, I use wide angles whenever I need to use wide angles, so it's not like my first choice for a lens. And the reason being because I don't like distortion that much. I prefer like 50 millimeter focal lengths or higher, where everything looks more straight. It just looks more pleasing to my eye, but I know people love wide angles, and I've seen some incredible photos with wide angles. So I guess it just depends on if you like them or not. So it doesn't really work for me as much as the 50, which is why it's my least used lens. But what I really love about wide angles, which I cannot get with, let's say, with other lenses, is that you can really get POV style photos, which means that you make the viewer feel like they're right there with you when you take the photo, which is very powerful. And you can, this lens, if used correctly, can create a lot of impact. Even if it's just landscapes or street photography, the good thing about wide angle is it can immediately create impact and grab someone's attention. So they're very well known for that stuff. Also, a great thing about wide angles is because you're getting everything into the scene, you can create a lot of layers, and those layers just add interest into the photo, especially for street photography or landscapes. It's amazing for that. It's just where I live, personally, not much is happening, which is maybe why I don't use this that much. I live on a small island called Cyprus, so not much happens here. Which makes it a bit difficult for me to, create a lot of layers in my photos. Could be an excuse, I don't know, I have to experiment with it more, but that's how I feel. Anyway, it's a great lens, definitely worth every penny. So the second lens is the Sony Zeiss 50-1.4, which I don't have right now because I'm using it on the camera to shoot me. And this is my favorite lens from all the lenses that I own. I got this lens last year, and I will explain why I love this so much, but basically this is on my camera 90% of the time. I use it for everything. I use it for portraits, environmental portraits. I use it for landscapes even, which, people say 50 millimeter might be a bit boring for landscapes, but I personally don't find it boring. It's just the rendering of this lens is unbelievable. I've never owned such a lens in my life. And if like somebody was to get into the Sony E-mount system, I would say like this is the one lens to get. Like if you're just gonna buy one lens, this is the lens you should get. And that of course also depends if you like the focal length. I know some people don't like 50. I'm a big 50 shooter. I used to be a 35-85 guy, and I changed that last year because I just felt the 85 is a bit too long and the 35 a bit too wide, and the 50 is just right in the middle, which was perfect for me. It took some time getting used to it, but now that I'm used to it, I love it, and I use it for everything. Even street photography, which I'm not really a big street photography shooter. I do it for fun, but it works for that as well. What's amazing about this lens is that the rendering is incredible. Even at 1.4, it's the sharpest lens that I've ever used in my life from all the lenses that I've tried. And also, it creates kind of like a 3D look. It's hard to explain it, but if you go like on Instagram or on websites where people use this lens and you look at the photos, you will immediately understand what I mean by 3D rendering. The photos have a lot of depth in them, and that personally excites me, which is why I use this lens. It's also amazing for low light work, because it's a 1.4 and I love shooting in low light. So, even at nighttime, I get to use this lens a lot. Now, the one downside about this lens is that the autofocus is a bit on the slower side compared to all the other lenses. I guess it's because it's a big, heavy chunk of glass, or because maybe it's one of the first lenses made for the Sony E-mount. I'm not sure. But I also used to own the Sonar 55, which I know a lot of people love that lens. Personally, I only used it for a while and I sold it because I just didn't like the rendering, the way it looked. But I know a lot of people love it. To me, that was a really fast focusing lens. So this is definitely much slower than that. So sometimes it can give me trouble, especially in low light. Sometimes it can start hunting. And it's weird because if you increase the ISO, so like more light gets into the sensor, then suddenly it just starts behaving correctly and suddenly you don't have any autofocusing problems. But if your ISO is a bit lower and like it looks a bit dimmer, then it starts to struggle at nighttime. But anyway, I don't care about all those things because every photo that I get with this lens is a keeper for me, and it's a workhorse and I use it for everything. And which is why I love this lens, and I will keep it probably forever. Before I move on to the next lens, which is the Sony 90mm macro 2.8, I just want to say, guys, if you have any questions whatsoever about the gear that I use, or if any other questions that you have, just leave them in the comments down below. Because I'm just starting to do this on YouTube, any ideas you can give me on what kind of content you want will help me to create that content. And like I said, I want to build a community. I want to hear from you guys. And which is why I started this YouTube channel, because I want to build a community and make friends and talk about photography. So any questions you have, leave them down below in the comments. Okay, so the next one, 90mm macro. This is again a very sharp lens, but this is not like really a main lens for my personal work. It's just something that I use for products, like product photography or food photography. My wife has a YouTube channel where she makes food, she cooks food, and I shoot all the videos for that channel, and I use this lens for that. So anyway, 90 is big for me for like products and food. For food especially, like you can use a 50, you can use a 35 obviously, but I don't find that they look as good as longer focal lengths like 85, 90, 100. I think it's like the perfect balance for shooting stuff like that. It just makes food look tastier, which is why I use it. And obviously it's good to own a macro. I mean, it's not necessary to own a macro, but it's good to have one. And since it can do things that other lenses can't do, I just felt like I needed to own one. But like I said, it's not a personal work lens. Like I don't use it for my personal photography. It's just something that I shoot products with, and it can make me money. It's a good lens. Also for video, it's pretty good. It's one of the strangest designs because unlike all the other Sony E-mount lenses, the manual focus, actually this thing just goes up and down and you just get into manual. And also the manual focus, I don't know if what I'm gonna say is true, but when I'm focusing manually, it doesn't feel like focused by a wire, which all the other lenses are focused by a wire, which what it means is that when you're moving the ring around, it's like, depending on how fast you move it, like your focus will either go somewhere else, like longer or shorter. So this doesn't behave like that, which kind of tells me that it's not focused by a wire, but I'm not exactly sure about that. It also has a distance scale on it. It's the only lens I own that has a distance scale. Not really going to use that for my kind of work, but it's there. Anyway, it's incredibly sharp and definitely worth it to use this lens. Finally, we're bringing on the big guns. This baby right here, the Sony 100 to 400 G Master. I got this lens about a year and a half ago, or a year ago, I can't remember exactly, but anyway, ever since I got it, it just opened up so many doors for me for photography. It's probably my second favorite lens after the 50mm, and for many reasons, which I will explain. Number one reason is that I really like depth and compression in my photos. Like, I love looking at compression. And what better way than to use a telephoto to get compression, right? So when I bought this lens, I was trying to decide if I should get this or the 70-200 G Master, which is also another excellent lens, or the 200 to 600, which came just a bit after the other lenses. So the main reason why I chose this lens is that I wanted versatility. So this gives me 100 to 400, which is a big range, and I can use it for a lot of different things. But also I wanted something which is small, like compared to the other lenses, like compared to the 200-600, which is a huge lens. Like, I definitely cannot travel with that lens. I can travel with this lens. It fits in my backpack just fine. So I wanted something which is versatile, but also like travel friendly. So, which is why I got this. Now, when I got this, I went crazy. Like, I started shooting with it all the time, and I slowly discovered that how much I love compression and shooting things that are far. And I've been using this for everything, like from landscapes, and people would think, why would you use the telephoto for landscapes? If you haven't tried that, you should definitely try it. Some of my favorite landscape photos came out of this lens. Extremely sharp. I even shot portraits with this, which is funny. Like, why would you use a 400mm telephoto lens for portraits? And I'll give you an example. Like, I shot a photo of my wife at this place called Aphrodite's Rock in Cyprus, which it's basically a giant rock, but it's in the middle of the sea. So like, you're kind of far from it. But if you look at the photo, which I will put it up now, if you look at the photo, it just looks like the rock is huge and it's right behind my wife. And the reason that worked, obviously, is because I zoomed all the way to 400 and I told my wife to walk towards me. Of course, I shouted at her because I was really far, which was kind of funny. But she starts walking at me and the rock just looks huge because, you know, telephoto lenses basically bring forward anything that's really far. They bring them forward. So it just created, I had this photo in mind before I went there, that I wanted to create this photo, and I managed to make it work. And what's funny is that if you ever go there and you look at it, it will just never look like what it looks like in the photo. If you go there, you'll just see a giant rock far into the ocean, and it just doesn't look like what it looks in the photo. So it's kind of crazy. I love using this lens for stuff like that. The only difficult thing, let's say, about this lens is that obviously it's a bit hard to handhold at 400mm. So you have to kind of get used to balancing the lens on the camera. Also, because the Sony cameras are a bit small, it just feels a bit unbalanced because this is very front heavy, a very big piece of glass. But also sometimes, because I really like shooting at golden hours and just after golden hours when the blue hour starts, because at the widest end it's 4.5, f4.5, and at the longest it's like 5.6. So it kind of struggles in low light. Which is why I was considering getting the 70-200 G Master, which is, I've heard it's also an excellent lens. But I just need more versatility. That's why I went for this one. I've shot, with the Sony cameras, like my A7 III, it's, even shooting at 6400 ISO or 8000 ISO, I can get pretty good looking photos. There is noise, but it doesn't bother me that much. So, I can still use this lens for a blue hour, because the Sony cameras have become so good at low light. Anyway guys, so that's the 4 lenses that I use, which, I've bought many lenses and I've sold many lenses over the years, and I've stuck with these 4. I guess the only lens that's kind of missing from my lineup is the 24 1.4 G Master. I really want to own that lens. because like I said, I'm not a big wide angle shooter, but I would like to have a wide angle for low light stuff. So if I could add one lens, that would probably it. Just another piece of advice that I want to give you when you're buying lenses is that you should try and buy the best lenses that you can afford. Like, don't try to cheap out on lenses. If you want to cheap out on something, cheap out on camera bodies, because camera bodies, like, they're not really worth that much. Every 2-3 years they lose their value and you can always upgrade, but the lenses actually stick with you forever, or like for years. So always try to invest in the best glass that you can. And also, this is the thing that I learned the hard way, is that lenses actually play a bigger role in how your photos look than camera bodies. Like, camera bodies don't make that much of a difference. I own a Fuji X Pro 1, which is a 10-11-year-old camera, and it still takes amazing photos. I can make that camera look like it's a modern camera. So always try to invest in the best glass that you can afford. Anyway, so that's what I have for you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button, because it really helps me out to start this channel. If you have any comments, leave them down below. If you have any suggestions, also leave them down in the comments. I might be sounding a bit awkward right now because it's the first time I'm sitting in front of camera. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys on the next video.